So the liturgical program says, hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. And that doesn't say, listen to what the minister is saying. Now, nevertheless, your expectation is that the minister will talk, whether it be a he, a she, tall, short, thick, or thin. The minister's job is to talk. And your task is to listen to what the Spirit is saying. And that's a little bit like saying to a young group of readers, now, it's not important to just read the lines on the page, but also to listen for what's between the lines. And listening to the Spirit is a little bit like listening between the lines. I'd like to begin by thinking of something that our United Church moderator said not too long ago in a public place. What had happened is that our Canadian federal government had made a decision about health care for persons who had come to this country from other places. And for whatever reason, perhaps the Spirit moved her, but the moderator said something about the church's responsibility to be faithful to those who were in need without respect of who they were or where they came from. And the rather remarkable thing is that some spokesman for the government suggested that the church really should mind its own business and not to be meddling in politics. The church's job was to take care of people, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, things like that. And I don't believe our moderator was quarreling with that part of our vocation, our calling. But the leader of the government made an error in judgment by suggesting that the church had nothing to say about politics. You see, the two texts we have in front of us today are very much about politics. And in particular, they are about the failure of politics. The failure of politics to care for creation. The failure of politics to care for people. Your own people and other people. Doesn't the Scripture say somewhere how it's simple to love those who are just like you, but the calling is to love those especially who are not like you? But in the days of Amos, in the days of Mark, politics were failing. And that's why God called people like Mark and Amos to bear witness or to testify. And maybe the simplest way of thinking about that is to get them to tell stories. Now, it would be quite well if we were to stop by suggesting that politics was in the sights of God, but in a particular way, it wasn't politics alone. It was religion that had accommodated itself to politics so that the religious teachings, instead of questioning politics, began to support them. And that's what was happening in Amos's day. The priests in the temple were living very, very well because they had gained the favor of the king. And by saying things that the king wanted said, the priests got a real good living. And that's not just a problem in Amos's day. It was also the problem in Jesus' day. And it was the problem in every period of history where things were gone wrong. Religion forgot that it was there to serve the interests of God and not the interests of politics. It forgot that politics was to make possible what religion revealed in terms of human destiny, what it means to be a person with persons in communities where we cooperate in love by accepting and forgiving one another. Amos uses two images. One is a plumb line. Is there a carpenter in the house? Or someone who can tell me what a plumb line is? Yes.
Plumb line is a cord with a weight on the bottom.
Yes.
And it's held up so that it's true vertical.
Yes.
So they can line up walls and things like that to make sure that they're true in the true vertical.
Lovely.
It's the same as a spirit level. Same purpose as a spirit level.
So it's a tool that a carpenter or a mason might use to build a building to make sure that the walls are true to the foundation. In the church, we speak about Jesus Christ being the cornerstone and the apostles being the foundation. And then we, of course, are expected to be measured by the plumb line to see that we build in accordance with that cornerstone and that foundation. So Amos is measuring things to see if they are square, and the text suggests that Amos finds things to be out of kilter. And therefore, he speaks about a visitation. God is saying, I'm not going to overlook this. I'm going to do something about it. And you know, if you're a bricklayer or a house builder and you've built a wall, and quite late in the process you discover that the wall is crooked, you are better off to take it down and start over than to allow it to pass. Because if you allow a wall that is not fitting to the foundation to stand, who knows but a strong wind might come or an earthquake might come, and the structure would be insecure and everything would come falling down. So God has it in mind to dismantle, to take apart things as they are so that they might be as they ought to be. That's what God does. And that's why I put as a title, Diagnosis and Remedy. God is the good physician who looks at our human being, notices if things aren't well, and sets in place a plan for healing. And that's what we encounter in the Gospel of Mark. Jesus, like Amos, has noticed that the religion and politics of his day are off square. They are not true to the foundation, and therefore they are in danger of falling. And so Jesus calls a people. And it says in the text that 12 persons were chosen. And some folk would like to get very specific that it was 12. But if you read the Bible long enough, and if you think about it deeply enough, and if you converse about it with your friends and neighbors on a regular basis, you will discover that the Bible likes to speak in a spiritual language, not so much a literal language. So getting back to our story about the turtle, we have a literal being, our material being, but we also have a spiritual being. And in this case, the number 12 is probably a spiritual number. That is to say, it represents a group of people, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 people, twice 12. A group of people who have gathered to admire and follow the way that Jesus makes present for them. And the remarkable thing is that Jesus is not a rebuilder of things as they are. He is a promiser of things as they are to be. So if there's any chance that you are a little bit concerned about where things are at in your own life, maybe the life of your little church community, maybe the life of your, is this a village or a town or a city? This place, district. If you're worried about these things, or if you're worried about the world, Jesus says you probably have good reason. Just as in the days of Amos, just as in the days of Mark, political life and religious life has gotten off track. And what Jesus does is he prepares people to help those who suffer because things aren't as they should be. And that's you folks. You've gathered here to the name of Jesus. And one of the first things you may feel inside of your imagination, we also speak of inside of your heart or your mind, You might feel that you are inadequate to what it is that Jesus hopes to accomplish. And I'd like you to know that Amos and Mark were ordinary persons. Sometimes our history in the church leads us to believe that they were superheroes or stars of some kind, and different in such a way that we could never measure up. But they are not. And Amos makes that clear. When Amaziah comes to him and says, "Listen, we're tired of your news about the world getting undone and about an alternative that God has in mind. Why don't you go preach somewhere else and see if people will give you wages?" And Amos says, "But I'm not a priest. You see, I'm not a prophet. I'm a farmer. And I'm just doing what God told me to do. And God told me to tell the people that things have gone wrong and God is going to set them right." And it's the same with Mark. Mark is simply a young man who has met Jesus, been influenced by his teaching, has decided to follow and write a gospel, or to tell a story about all the good that Jesus has done while he witnessed. And what Mark speaks about is how Jesus has the power to encourage the discouraged, to relieve those who are oppressed by one thing or another. And then Mark tells us that Jesus chooses people to help in that work. So what I'm going to suggest to you, that we live in a troubled time and that there is a remedy. And that remedy lives inside of you, in your determination to be the best family member that you can be, the best young granddaughter and grandson that you can be, to cooperate where you are able to cooperate, to encourage where you are able to encourage, to do what you are capable of doing to lighten the load for somebody who you meet along the way. It might be somebody close, it might be a stranger. But the gospel is that message of God's good news which encourages us to take an active part in making a difference. And then the gospel says something a little bit challenging. You know that the Olympics are going to be celebrated by the citizens of the world in a short while. You're excited about the Olympics. A little bit? Yeah. Are you an athlete? No. But it's exciting. And God knows that anybody who wants to compete in the Olympics has to make a decision at some point in their life to do what it takes to be the best possible person who jumps or runs or swims or throws. And so the gospel tells us the people Jesus chose decided to get themselves ready to make a difference. And they get themselves ready by separating the important from the not so important. And basically Jesus says, go simply, go plainly, go easily. Don't carry lots of baggage when you go to share the gospel with people. All you really need, and I'm paraphrasing Mark here, all you really need is a good smile, bright eyes, helping hands, feet ready to go somewhere and make a difference. That's what you need. And gospel even says, don't be too concerned about what you're going to eat or drink or where you're living. Trust in the hospitality of others. I'll sum it up by saying, train yourselves to be messengers of good news where you live. Do you remember, some of you, the song we sang when we were children? You in your small corner and I in mine. Jesus bids us shine. That's what Mark is talking about. And he also says, don't do it alone. Have somebody to do it with. Form a partnership. Get a friend who wants to be with you as you go about trying to make a difference. And then, of course, gather together in a community, sing, pray, read, study, and of course, once in a while, in fact, as often as you can, take time to laugh. So the lessons for today are simply a reminder that when things have gone wrong, God has not disappeared. God is making a difference, and he's making that difference through you and me and people just like us all over the world. Let's look for the changes that are sure to follow our decision to follow in that way. So I'm going to ask you just to think about that for a moment, and then we are going to sing together for the healing of the nations. That's the purpose God has in mind.